Alright, so now that we got our project all set up, it's time to start editing. In this video, I want to talk about my keyboard shortcuts, the ones that I like to use the most. Now, there are literally hundreds of different keyboard shortcuts that you can use. I personally only use a dozen or so that I will teach in this video, but I do recommend learning some keyboard shortcuts, as the more you can learn and memorize, the faster you'll be able to edit, and the faster you can edit, the more projects you can do, and therefore the more money you can make. So very important to learn keyboard shortcuts. So let's go ahead and dive in and start showing you some of the keyboard shortcuts I like to use. The first one, and probably the most important one, is spacebar. When you push spacebar, that's what plays the clip, and when you push it again, that's what pauses the clip. The next one I use a lot is plus and minus. When you push plus, that zooms into your timeline, so you can do very fine editing down to every individual frame. And when you minus, that zooms you back out to be able to see all of your clips. Now, sometimes when you zoom out, you see it's super clumped up on the side here. So another keyboard shortcut you can use so that it fills the whole timeline is Shift Z, and that will automatically fill your whole timeline with your clips. Probably the next most important shortcuts would be B is a blade tool, which allows you to cut up your footage. So as you're going through, you're going to be cutting up footage, and then A allows you to get back to your select tool so that you can select something and then delete it. And this is one great thing about the Final Cut Pro timeline versus Premiere, is they have a magnetic timeline that automatically deletes the space in between the clips that you delete. So that's something I really like about Final Cut Pro, is that magnetic timeline. Now, a lot of times when I'm editing, I'll find a clip where I like two different parts. Let's say I like that part, but I also like this second part as well, and I'm not sure yet which one I want to choose. So a lot of times I'll just raise this above the other one, and then I'll push V, which then hides or disables that clip. And if I push V again, it will enable it, disable, enable. Next keyboard shortcut is S. When you click S, this turns on your scrubbing, which allows you to scrub through your footage without having to hold down your mouse. That's something in Premiere Pro, is I have to hold down the mouse to be able to play back the footage. And if I click S again, it turns off that scrubbing, and as you can see, as I move my mouse, it's not scrubbing through the footage. You'll also notice that as I go from clip to clip, it automatically snaps to the edge of the clips. And there's times where you'll want that and times when you won't. So to turn that off, I have it set to keyboard shortcut F, which turns off that snapping so it doesn't automatically go to the end of a clip. And the times when you'd use this is when you're scrubbing through and you want to cut really close to the line here. If you have your snapping turned on, then it's going to go from here to there, and you won't be able to cut in that area in between there. So I push F, and that allows me to make cuts in this little area. Now, by default, the keyboard shortcut to this is N, but I have that set to create compound clip, which we'll talk about in a second. And so just so you guys are aware, these are specifically my keyboard shortcuts that I've created so that they match up well with my Premiere Pro workflow, so that you guys can go seamlessly between the two, with most of the keyboard shortcuts being the same. And the way you can customize and create keyboard shortcuts is coming here to Final Cut Pro, Commands, Customize, and then you can individually go in here and find something like the snapping tool and see that I've customized it to F when originally it was N. And so that you don't have to go through and customize all these like I have, what I'm teaching you, I provided for you before the next video a download where you can download my keyboard shortcuts, and then once downloaded, you'll come in here to Imports, find my keyboard shortcuts, open, and then come in here to Commands and select Parker Keyboard Shortcuts, and then all these keyboard shortcuts that I'm teaching you will automatically be applied. Moving on to our next keyboard shortcut, when I have A as my select tool and I raise a clip above the timeline here, the magnetic timeline will automatically snap in its void, but there's times when I don't want that whole thing to slide over, I just want a space to be left here. So if you push P, your position tool, that allows you to raise the clip, and it will leave a black space there so it doesn't disrupt the rest of your timeline. And now you can move this clip freely without it affecting any of the timeline. But be careful when you have the P tool selected, it will override whatever else you have on your timeline if you put it on the same timeline. You have to make sure to select A for it to squeeze in between and magnetically push the rest of the clips aside. Now, as your very basic keyboard shortcuts, Command C is copy, and then Command V is paste. And let's say you have color correction applied to one of your clips and you want to paste that same color correction onto another clip. You'll push Command C to copy that clip, go to your next clip, and push Option V to paste the attributes or effects that were on that clip. And then you can come in here and select exactly which attributes you would like to paste onto this new clip, and then push paste. And then you'll see here that that color correction has also been applied to that second clip. Now the Option V keyboard shortcut is another one that I've customized to match my Premiere Pro workflow. So just be aware that some of these aren't by default. You would have to download my keyboard shortcuts to be able to have these same commands. Next keyboard shortcut that you're going to use a lot is Command Z, which is undo, and then Command Shift Z is redo. So those are two keyboard shortcuts that I use a lot. Is I'll make a change and then undo it, redo it, undo it, redo it, so I can see back and forth the change I made to see if I like it or if I want to change anything else about it. Next keyboard shortcut is Command T. That automatically creates a transition or crossfade between clips, as you can see there. And then you have the option to stretch those out to make them crossfade over a longer period of time. For our next keyboard shortcut, let's suppose we have several clips stacked on top of each other and several audio layers, and we want to compound all of those into just one clip. You highlight all of them and push N is what I have it set to compound the clip, and then push OK, and that then makes all of them one clip. Next keyboard shortcut that I use a lot is Command J. This brings up your custom speed effects, which allows you to reverse a clip or change the duration of a clip. So that will allow you to change the speed very quickly. Let's say I want to slow this back down, push Command J, type in the percentage, hit enter, and it changes the duration of that clip for you. Now I've also created two other keyboard shortcuts that make it even faster than that. The two main speeds I go between is normal speed and the slowed down speed to whatever the frame rate is that I'm editing on, which is almost always 24 frames per second. So to switch back between normal speed and slow motion speed, I have H set to 100%, H for 100, and that brings it back to normal speed. And then J takes it back to slow motion. In this case, because it's a 60 frame per second clip, it automatically converts it to 40%. Next keyboard shortcut I use a lot is U for unlink in Premiere Pro. What that does is unlinks the audio from your video so that you can move the audio freely separate from the video. And in Premiere Pro, you can just highlight both of them and push U again, and it'll bring them back together. I'm not sure how to do that in Final Cut Pro. The only solution I've found is to compound that clip by pushing N, and it brings them back together as a compound clip. Next keyboard shortcut is K. What K does is it adds a keyframe wherever you have your cursor on your audio. And let's say you want to turn down this part of your audio and turn up this part. So knowing how to make these keyframes will be important for the sound designing video, which we'll talk about later. Unfortunately, in Final Cut Pro, it doesn't allow you to add keyframes to your video footage to do time remapping. So that is one downside to Final Cut Pro X over Premiere, is the time remapping or speed ramping function isn't quite as good, and we'll talk about that in the speed ramping video. Now, a command I use a lot in Premiere Pro is Command S, which saves my file. You don't have to do that in Final Cut Pro. It automatically saves continuously. Now, Premiere Pro also auto saves every 15 minutes or so, but this is constantly saving as you go, so I think it's a little bit nicer feature than Premiere's. Another keyboard shortcut I use a lot in Premiere is Command R, which is render, but again, Final Cut Pro renders as you go, so that's another thing you don't have to worry about. It's constantly rendering in the background as long as you're not playing back your footage. Now, if at any point you want to import more footage, all you do is push Command I, and that brings up your media import, where you would then go in, find exactly what you want to import, and go ahead and import selected. Now let's suppose you have your final video all ready to go and you're ready to export. To create in and out points to determine the portion you want to export as the final video, you push I at the beginning and O at the end of the portion you want to export as your final video. And you'll see this yellow rectangle around the area that it will be exporting. Now this is important to do because if you have a bunch of other stuff on your timeline that you don't want it to export, if you don't create those in and out points, it's going to export out all 37 minutes of this footage instead of just the final video that you wanted it to export. And then once you've selected your in and out points, you can press Command E to pull up your export settings to export out the final video. And again, we'll talk about all the export settings I use at the end of this course. So there you have it. Those are all the keyboard shortcuts I like to use. And again, feel free to customize these any way you want. Download mine if you like the ones I've made. But that's it, guys. If you have any further questions, please let me know.